The wind of early autumn swept across Crescent Lake, carrying a chill that skimmed the wooden planks of the old bridge. Mia, 17, walked with Ranger, her retired search and rescue dog, expecting nothing more than a quiet afternoon stroll. But Ranger stopped, not slowly, not hesitantly. He froze, every muscle locked, the fur along his spine rising like a warning flare. His eyes fixed on a single section of the bridge, an ordinary patch of sun-bleached wood. Then came a low, trembling growl, the kind he only used when something was terribly wrong. Before Mia could react, Ranger stepped in front of her, blocking her path, tugging at her jeans with frantic urgency. His gaze shot downward, toward the still surface of the lake. Perfectly calm, perfectly quiet, perfectly wrong. People walking by laughed, calling Ranger old, jumpy, overly dramatic. But Mia knew Ranger's instincts had never failed. She placed one foot onto the plank he tried to avoid. Thud. The entire bridge shivered beneath her. A metallic clang echoed from underneath, deep, unnatural, as if something heavy had struck the supporting beams from below. Ranger barked sharply, shoving her backward. Then the bridge trembled again, harder this time, as if something hidden beneath the water was trying to be found. Early autumn in Montana always had a way of softening the world. Pines lining the hills swayed gently, and Crescent Lake reflected the sky like polished glass. Nothing ever seemed urgent here. Nothing ever seemed dangerous. The old Crescent Bridge, built more than 40 years earlier, stood as a quiet landmark of the town, creaking in the wind, aging with dignity. Locals often joked that the bridge complained more than it functioned, yet no one doubted its safety. It had endured storms, winters, and decades of footsteps. Families crossed it daily. Fishermen tied their boats beneath it. Children carved their initials into its rails. No one imagined the old structure could be hiding a threat, one that lay submerged in the cold, shadowed depths of the lake. Just a short walk from the bridge lived Mia and her father Tom. Their small house sat on a hill overlooking the water. 3 years earlier, an accident had taken Mia's mother, leaving behind a silence that neither of them knew how to fill. Tom buried himself in work, inspections, bridge reports, repair schedules, anything to avoid confronting the grief. As a veteran civil engineer, he trusted numbers, measurements, materials, not intuition. Mia withdrew inward. Her world became smaller, quieter. And then came Ranger. Once a celebrated search and rescue dog, Ranger had found lost hikers, tracked missing children, even located a man buried under snow after an avalanche. Age had slowed him, but not dulled his instincts. His gait was uneven now, his breaths heavier on cold mornings, yet the sharp light in his eyes remained. For Mia, Ranger was more than a dog. He was steady ground after the world had shifted beneath her feet. He lay beside her during sleepless nights. He nudged her hand whenever she drifted too deep into her thoughts. And in the quiet of Crescent Lake, Ranger seemed to sense things no human ever noticed. Shifts in wind, faint echoes on the water, changes in the earth beneath the bridge. It would be Ranger who sensed the danger first. It would be Ranger who refused to let Mia take one more step forward. And it would be Ranger who uncovered a truth long hidden beneath the lake's calm surface. A truth that would shake the town far more than the trembling bridge ever could. The first time Ranger reacted strangely near Crescent Bridge, Mia didn't think much of it. It was a week before the incident on the planks. The afternoon sun filtered through thin clouds, casting pale reflections across the lake. Mia had taken her usual path home after school, Ranger trotting steadily beside her with that familiar, uneven rhythm of an aging hero. But the moment the bridge came into view, Ranger slowed. His ears tilted forward, his tail sank. Then he stopped entirely, staring at the center of the bridge as if someone were standing there. Someone only he could see. What is it, Sherman? Boy? Mia whispered, touching his head. Ranger didn't move. He didn't sniff the air or wander off the way dogs sometimes do. He simply watched, rigid and intent, eyes narrowed against a threat Mia could not sense. It wasn't until she nudged him gently that he broke focus and continued walking, though reluctantly, glancing over his shoulder again and again. When they reached the foot of the bridge, Ranger circled Mia twice, protective, uneasy. His breathing grew shallow, and he positioned himself between her and the wooden planks. At the time, Mia assumed he heard something beneath the bridge, maybe a boat engine or a loose buoy. Ranger had always been sensitive to echoes, remnants of his years detecting faint cries or shifting snowpacks during rescue operations. But that night at dinner, when she casually mentioned Ranger's odd behavior, Tom barely looked up from his laptop. "The bridge is fine, sweetheart," he said, tapping a spreadsheet filled with inspection data. "I just checked it 2 months ago. Sound structure. Old wood, yes, but safe." Mia nodded. She trusted her father's work, yet Ranger's reaction replayed in her mind like a stuck record. The next day, the same thing happened. As they neared the bridge, Ranger's pace faltered. His eyes tracked the boards again, this time with a low, rumbling growl growing in his throat. His nose flicked toward the lake, nostrils flaring sharply. He took a step back, then another, refusing to approach. "Ranger, come on," Mia coaxed. But Ranger planted his paws into the dirt, chest trembling. He wasn't afraid. He was warning her. Still, the world around them remained so ordinary. Children laughing on bikes, fishermen packing up their lines, that Mia dismissed the feeling tightening in her chest. "Maybe he's just getting older," she murmured, stroking his fur. But Ranger's instincts had saved lives before. He had sensed avalanches minutes before they fell. He had found survivors in storms no human could navigate. And now, something about Crescent Bridge made his pulse race. Something deep, hidden, and growing louder beneath the calm surface of the lake. By the third day, Ranger's strange behavior had become impossible for Mia to ignore. But for everyone else in Crescent Lake, it was little more than a curious anecdote. That afternoon, the sky hung low with pale clouds as Mia approached the bridge with Ranger at her side. Just as before, he tensed, body lowering, eyes narrowing, a soft growl vibrating through his chest. Mia stopped, resting a reassuring hand on his neck, but he stayed rooted to the ground. An older couple passing by slowed their steps and chuckled. "Looks like your pup's scared of a few old planks," the man teased warmly. "He's just getting up there in age," the woman added. "Happens to all of us, dear." Mia forced a polite smile, though her heart wasn't convinced. Ranger wasn't skittish. Not ever. Not even during thunderstorms, something that terrified most dogs. He had been trained to walk into the unknown, to trust his senses above all else. But the world around her kept pushing back against that thought. A group of boys on bicycles zipped by, rattling the bridge. The wood creaked loudly, but no more than usual. A fisherman nearby shrugged when he heard Ranger barking. "Probably smelled a dead fish," he said. "Dogs go crazy for that." Even Tom brushed it aside when she mentioned it again that evening. "Mia," he said, gently but firmly. "Ranger's an amazing dog, but he's old now. His hearing, his nerves, they change with age. I promise you, if there were any structural problems with that bridge, I'd be the first to know." He spoke with that calm authority only engineers carried, the kind that made Mia feel unreasonable for even questioning his conclusion. But it didn't silence the unease growing inside her. Ranger wasn't confused. He wasn't skittish. He was certain. And that certainty terrified her more than the trembling of the bridge itself. The next morning, she tried a different route to school, hoping to avoid stressing Ranger. But he refused to move unless she turned away from the bridge. Refused. As though crossing it would be the single worst mistake she could make. When Mia finally gave in and chose the long path through the park, Ranger relaxed for the first time in days. His breathing eased, his tail lifted slightly, and the tension drained from his body. That was when Mia realized something important. Ranger wasn't afraid of the bridge. He was afraid for her. He wasn't trying to avoid the wooden planks. He was trying to protect her from something beneath them, something no one else believed existed. The day everything changed began like any other. A quiet afternoon, a pale sun drifting behind thin clouds, and Mia walking home from school with her backpack slung low, and Ranger waiting eagerly at the gate. But something in the air felt different. Ranger paced restlessly on the porch, glancing toward the direction of the bridge again and again, ears flicking as if catching sounds no human could hear. His nails clicked anxiously against the wooden boards, tracing frantic little circles. "Hey, boy," Mia murmured, kneeling beside him. "It's okay. We're staying away from the bridge today, remember?" But Ranger wasn't listening. His gaze remained fixed on the distant span of wood, stiffening with every passing second. Then, in one sharp, startling movement, he lunged. The old metal clasp on his tether snapped open with a metallic clink, something Mia had never seen him do in all the years he lived with them. Before she could react, Ranger bolted down the driveway, his aging legs moving with a desperate strength she hadn't seen since his rescue days. "Ranger!" Mia shouted, sprinting after him. He didn't slow. Didn't look back. He ran with purpose, straight toward Crescent Bridge. By the time Mia reached the start of the bridge, she was breathless. Ranger stood in the center, his chest rising and falling in sharp bursts, ears pinned forward, a deep growl rolling out of him like thunder. "Ranger, what are you doing?" She took one step toward him. The wooden plank beneath her foot dipped, just slightly, but enough for her body to feel it. Ranger barked explosively, launching himself at her. His teeth caught the fabric of her jeans, yanking her backward with surprising force. She stumbled, falling onto her hands just as the plank gave a longer, heavier creak beneath the shifting wind. And then it happened. A violent tremor shook the bridge, rippling through the beams beneath their feet. Mia froze, her breath caught in her throat. Ranger's stance hardened, muscles trembling, as he positioned himself between her and the unstable stretch of wood. For a moment the entire world seemed suspended in silence, until a metallic clang rang out from beneath the water, deep, echoing, unnatural. Mia stared at Ranger, wide-eyed. He hadn't panicked. He hadn't hesitated. He had known. She reached for him with trembling fingers, understanding now that whatever lay beneath the calm lake hadn't just frightened him. It had driven him to break free. Tom arrived within minutes. He had been driving home from a site inspection when Mia's panicked call came through, and the urgency in her voice made his chest tighten. By the time he pulled over near Crescent Bridge, sirens still silent in the distance, he saw Mia standing beside Ranger, both shaken, both staring at the same unsettling stretch of wood. "What happened?" Tom hurried toward them, his eyes darting from Mia's pale face to the trembling planks. "Dad, the bridge moved. Ranger stopped me. It felt like something pushed from underneath." Tom frowned, the logical part of him resisting the idea. "Waves can cause that. Pressure shifts. Wooden structures flex over time." Before he could finish, Ranger growled sharply. The sound was low and guttural, not a warning bark, but a focused, territorial alarm. His nose was pointed downward, toward the surface of the lake. His entire body leaned forward, every muscle tense. Mia followed Ranger's gaze. The lake was calm, eerily calm. No boats, no swimmers, no wind strong enough to disturb it. Then it happened. Boom. A powerful thud reverberated through the beams beneath them, the kind that could only come from something dense, striking the supporting structure. The wood vibrated under their feet. Ripples flared outward across the lake. Tom jerked back in surprise, gripping the handrail. "What in the world?" Ranger barked ferociously, pacing to the edge of the railing, nostrils flaring. His tail was rigid, the tip twitching with instinctual tension. He pressed his body low, scanning the shadowed water, as if waiting for the unseen force to rise again. But nothing moved. Only the last of the ripples reached the shore. Tom swallowed hard. "Maybe debris? A log underwater?" Mia shook her head. "Dad, that wasn't a log." Ranger knew before it happened. He was scared. Ranger stepped back, bumping gently into Mia's leg. Protective, worried. His eyes flicked between her and the lake, as though torn between staying by her side or confronting whatever lurked beneath the surface. Tom crouched, pressing his palm flat against one of the planks. The wood was cold. Too cold. And then, another faint tremor wavered through the structure. It was subtle, but enough for Tom to feel it travel into his hand, like a warning whisper. He looked up at Mia, for the first time truly unsure. Something was under the bridge. Something moving. Something heavy. And Ranger had sensed it long before anyone else. The next day, the lake looked deceptively peaceful, as if it had swallowed yesterday's violence and buried it beneath the glassy surface. Early sunlight shimmered across the ripples, casting reflective patterns against the wooden beams of Crescent Bridge. But Mia felt a tension in the air that she couldn't shake. Ranger felt it too. He walked stiffly, his nose lifted toward the breeze, inhaling with quick, shallow breaths. Each step closer to the bridge seemed to tighten the muscles along his back. Mia held his leash firmly, but Ranger didn't pull or resist this time. Instead, he crept forward with cautious precision, like a veteran soldier returning to a battlefield he knew was not yet safe. Tom had insisted on doing a more thorough check that morning. He knelt near the center of the bridge, knocking on planks, testing bolts, listening for hollowness. But Crescent Bridge had always been good at hiding its secrets. "Everything looks normal," he murmured, though a hint of doubt edged his voice. Ranger suddenly froze. His head snapped toward the water, his ears lifted, pinpointing something invisible to everyone else. A soft growl vibrated from deep in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Mia whispered, following his line of sight. At first, she saw nothing, only the pale reflection of the sky. Then she saw it. A brief, sharp glint cut through the water, like sunlight striking metal far beneath the surface. It was faint, but unmistakable. A flash of something that didn't belong in the natural stillness of the lake. "Dad, did you see that?" Mia breathed. Tom stepped closer to the railing, squinting. "Probably just an old anchor or fishing gear. Light catches strange out here." But Ranger didn't believe that. He barked once, loud, urgent, not at the bridge, not at the air, but directly at the water where the glint had appeared. Then he leaned forward, so hard that Mia had to tighten her grip to keep him from slipping through the gap in the railings. His body shook, not with fear, but with recognition. He knew what he was sensing. Tom watched this display, his frown deepening. Why is he reacting like this? There's nothing visible down there. "There's something," Mia insisted. Rangers never acted like this without a reason. A breeze swept across the surface of the lake, and for a brief moment, the light bent again, revealing the faint outline of a shape just beyond the sun's reach. Something long, something rigid. Ranger's breathing quickened. His claws scraped against the planks as he shifted, as though preparing to jump in. Tom finally exhaled, shaken. "I think we need a diver." For the first time, Tom's voice carried fear. Not of what they might find, but fear that Ranger had been right all along. Tom wasn't a man who jumped to conclusions. But after witnessing the tremors, hearing the metallic thuds, and seeing Ranger's unwavering fixation on the lake, Even he couldn't ignore the possibility that something was terribly wrong beneath Crescent Bridge. By noon, two local volunteer divers arrived, both experienced men who had searched these waters countless times for lost fishing gear, sunken branches, and the occasional canoe that slipped its mooring. But nothing in their training prepared them for what Ranger was suggesting. Mia stood beside Ranger as the divers strapped on their tanks. The dog pressed close against her leg, his body trembling with a tension that felt almost electric. His eyes stayed glued to the water, tracking the diver's every movement. "Where'd you see the flash?" one of them asked. Mia pointed to the exact spot Ranger had zeroed in on. "There, just past the middle beam." The diver nodded, then slipped beneath the water with a quiet splash, followed by the second. The lake swallowed them effortlessly, leaving only ripples behind. Tom paced the planks anxiously, glancing at his watch. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. Ranger could barely contain himself. He prowled along the railing, whining under his breath, nose twitching toward the depths. Every few seconds he let out a short, sharp bark, directed straight downward. Mia knelt beside him. "It's okay, boy. They'll find what you smelled." Tom stopped mid-step when he saw the first diver surface, but not calmly. The man burst upward with urgency, pulling off his mask and waving frantically toward his partner still below. "Tom!" he shouted, breathless. "You need to see this. There's something big down there, lodged under the support beams." Tom's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" Before the diver could answer, the second man surfaced, coughing as he ripped off his regulator. "It's a vehicle," he choked out. "A damn vehicle! Flipped on its side." Mia's breath caught. A chill swept across the bridge, as if the lake itself exhaled. Ranger barked again, a single, forceful sound that echoed across Crescent Lake. Not in fear, not in surprise, in confirmation. Tom stepped closer to the edge, staring into the water that now seemed darker, heavier, full of secrets. "A car?" he whispered. "Not just any car," the diver replied, voice low. "The model looks like a pickup, and it's wedged tight against the lower beams. You're going to want the sheriff here, now." Ranger stood tall, chest lifted, eyes fierce with certainty. He had been right from the beginning. And this was only the first layer of the truth waiting to surface. Within an hour, the sheriff's SUV rolled up the gravel path leading to Crescent Bridge. Yellow tape went up. Curious townspeople gathered at a distance. But Ranger stayed at Mia's side, unwavering, his gaze locked on the spot where the divers had surfaced. Sheriff Collins, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes, listened as the divers explained what they'd seen. His expression shifted from confusion to concern, to something that looked dangerously close to dread. "A vehicle lodged into the support beams?" he repeated. "How deep?" "About 15 feet, one diver answered. "Visibility isn't great down there, but we could make out the shape. It's definitely a pickup truck." The sheriff exhaled slowly. "Then we may have found something we've been looking for." Mia felt her pulse quicken. "Something. Or someone." The sheriff hesitated. 2 months ago, a man named Evan Carter, a civil engineer, went missing. His truck disappeared with him. Tom froze. He knew that name. Evan had been one of his colleagues, bright, meticulous, outspoken, a man who questioned things when others stayed silent. Tom remembered the last conversation they shared. Evan complaining about a questionable shipment of industrial materials being used in a construction project nearby. He had wanted to file a report, and then he vanished. "Evan's truck?" Tom murmured. "Are you sure?" "We won't know until we get it out," Sheriff Collins replied. "We'll need a winch team." The divers returned to the water with marker buoys. Each splash into the lake sounded heavier than the one before. The image of a sunken truck, hidden just beneath the calm surface, spread through the murmuring crowd like a cold wind. Ranger's growl deepened. He knew. He had probably smelled what the divers couldn't: chemicals, residue, corrosion, something unnatural clinging to the submerged metal. He pressed his nose to the gap between the railings, inhaling sharply before letting out a series of sharp barks, pacing, agitated, as if urging them to hurry. Mia knelt beside him, placing a hand on his fur. "It's okay, Ranger. They're getting it out." Meanwhile, Tom's mind raced. If Evan's truck was under Crescent Bridge, if it had been there for 2 months, if it was wedged into the very beams holding the structure upright, his throat tightened. "Sheriff," Tom said quietly, "if the truck struck the support posts, or if something inside it leaked, the integrity of this bridge may be severely compromised." The sheriff's eyes lifted toward the trembling planks, the tiny vibrations still perceptible beneath their feet. And Ranger, standing tall, ears forward, let out one more deep, resonant growl, as though he could feel the truth rising from the depths. Something in that truck was eating away at the bridge. And it had been doing so for months. The winch team arrived just before dusk. Heavy cables were secured to the crane truck parked at the shoreline, and the divers worked tirelessly to thread the lines beneath the submerged vehicle. Onlookers watched in uneasy silence as the lake, usually serene at this hour, churned with mechanical disturbance. Mia stood beside Ranger, arms wrapped tightly around herself as the first groan of metal rose from the water. The tension in the air felt suffocating. Tom leaned against the railing, eyes locked on the rippling surface. He still hadn't shaken the tremor he'd felt through the planks earlier. Something was fundamentally wrong with this bridge, something more than old age. Then, as the crane pulled harder, the water erupted. A burst of bubbles, a violent lurch, a loud mechanical screech. Slowly, painfully, the roof of the pickup truck breached the surface, caked in algae and mud. But what made Tom's stomach drop wasn't the truck itself. It was the beams holding it. As the vehicle lifted, the divers shouted from below, "Stop! Stop the winch! The support posts! It's eating through them!" Tom rushed to the edge and saw it clearly now. The lower beams of Crescent Bridge weren't just worn. They were rotting from the inside, hollowed out like something had chewed through them. Only it wasn't rot. It wasn't nature. It was chemical corrosion. A steady stream of pale, oily film leaked from one of the cracked containers in the truck bed, swirling into the lake with a nauseating shimmer. Ranger jerked backward, snarling, recognizing the scent that had warned him days ago. Mia felt the blood drain from her face. "Dad, that's what Ranger smelled. That's why he stopped me." Her voice trembled as the realization sank deeper. If she had stepped just a little farther, just 3 more steps onto the weakened section. Tom closed his eyes, imagining the scenario he couldn't bear to finish. One more step, one shift of the wind, one small tremor. The boards would have collapsed beneath her. She would have fallen straight into the lake, onto the rusted metal of Evan Carter's sunken truck, surrounded by leaking chemicals and broken beams. Ranger nudged Mia with his nose, sensing her spiraling thoughts. His warm breath brushed her fingertips. His eyes held the simple, steadfast truth. He had known, and he had acted, because instinct, not logic, had told him the bridge was dying beneath them. Tom turned pale as reality settled into his chest like a weight he could never remove. Ranger didn't just save Mia. He saved her life. And the danger wasn't over yet. The truck hadn't been fully lifted from the water yet, but already the truth was bleeding out, literally, through the cracked chemical containers in its bed. Pale liquid seeped into the lake in lazy spirals, carrying a sharp, bitter odor. Ranger reacted to with an immediate snarl. Tom covered his nose with his sleeve. "What kind of chemical is that?" Sheriff Collins signaled the hazmat unit, who had arrived with the winch team. One of the technicians leaned over the railing, watching the film swirl below. "Industrial solvent," he murmured. Highly corrosive. Eats through wood in days, sometimes hours if it's concentrated. Tom felt the world tilt. And this bridge has been standing on top of that for 2 months? The technician didn't answer directly, but his eyes said everything. Meanwhile, crews continued stabilizing the cables, preparing for the full extraction. As the truck rose inch by inch, a wet, metallic groan reverberated through the structure. Ranger pressed against Mia's legs, posture protective, as though he feared the bridge might collapse even now. Then a shout broke the air. "Sheriff! We found something else!" A diver climbed onto the lower platform, pulling off his mask. His expression was grim. "There's a sealed compartment inside the truck bed. Looked like it was bolted shut intentionally." Sheriff Collins stiffened. "Intentionally? Why would—" The diver continued. "Inside that compartment, there was a recorder, a waterproof one. It's damaged but still intact." A hush fell over the bridge. A recorder. Hidden. Protected. Tom's heart hammered against his ribs. "Bring it up," the sheriff ordered. Minutes later, the waterlogged device was laid out on a tarp. The hazmat team wiped it clean carefully, revealing deep scratches along the casing, scratches that looked like they were made by someone in a panic. Tom recognized the handwriting on a small, faded label. Carter, inspection notes. His breath caught. "Evan, what were you trying to record?" A technician managed to power the device with an external battery. The recorder crackled. Then a distorted voice filled the air. "They want me to sign off. Dangerous. Shipment isn't stable. I can't. If anything happens to that bridge—" Static. A muffled thud. A sharp intake of breath. "They warned me. Said accidents happen near the lake." The recording ended abruptly. No one spoke. Not the sheriff. Not Tom. Not the divers. Only Ranger moved. He stepped forward, placing his paw on the ground near the recorder, head bowed slightly. Not in fear, but in recognition. He had sensed the danger Evan Carter tried to warn them about. He had smelled the chemicals leaking into the beams. He had known the truth long before any human dared to look beneath the surface. And because of Ranger, the truth was no longer buried in the lake. By the following morning, Crescent Bridge was closed off entirely. Crews worked through the night, stabilizing the weakened beams and containing the leaking solvent. News traveled fast in a small Montana town, and by sunrise, nearly everyone knew the same 3 shocking facts. Evan Carter hadn't simply disappeared. His truck had been beneath the bridge the entire time, and Ranger, the old, retired search and rescue dog, had sensed the danger no one else could. People gathered at the lake's edge, speaking in hushed tones, glancing at Mia with a mixture of awe and gratitude. But Mia didn't feel like a hero. She felt shaken to her core, caught between the relief of being alive and the weight of understanding how close she had come to tragedy. Ranger sensed her heaviness. He pressed his head against her side, letting out a soft whine as if reminding her, "I'm here, you're safe." Tom approached from the inspection tent, fatigue etched across his face. For years, he had carried the silent guilt of not being able to save his wife. Losing her had carved a hollow place in him, one he couldn't fill no matter how many hours he poured into work. And yesterday, when Mia nearly stepped onto the collapsing beams, that hollow place almost cracked wide open again. When he reached her, Tom didn't speak. Instead, he pulled Mia into a long, trembling embrace. "I could have lost you too," he whispered. Mia hugged him back, her voice barely audible. "You didn't, because of Ranger." Tom looked down at the gray-muzzled dog sitting faithfully at their feet, his tail thumping once against the ground. "I've spent my entire life trusting data, measurements, charts, and ignoring things I couldn't explain, but Ranger saw what I didn't. He knew before any of us." There was a softness in Tom's voice Mia hadn't heard in a long time. Something tender, something healing. Later that afternoon, The sheriff addressed the gathered townspeople. He spoke of Evan Carter's bravery, his attempt to warn the authorities, and the heartbreaking reality that his final message had been hidden beneath the lake for months. As he talked, a quiet reverence filled the air. Then, Sheriff Collins turned to Ranger. "And none of this," he said, "would have come to light without him." People applauded, not loudly, but with a kind of gentle respect more powerful than any ovation. Children stepped forward to pet Ranger. Elderly neighbors thanked Mia and Tom. Some wiped tears from their eyes, realizing how much danger the town had unknowingly lived under. For the first time in 3 years, Mia felt something shift inside her. The weight she carried, the silence after her mother's death, the loneliness that had followed, seemed lighter. Not gone, but finally given room to breathe. Ranger curled up beside her feet, eyes half closed, content. He wasn't looking for praise. He didn't need recognition. He had protected his family. He had revealed the truth. And now he simply rested in the warmth of the people he had saved. 1 month after the truck was lifted from Crescent Lake, winter winds began brushing through Montana. The air grew sharper. The clouds drifted lower, and the hillsides took on shades of muted gold and gray. Crescent Bridge, once a quiet backdrop to daily life, had become a symbol of resilience and remembrance. Construction crews worked swiftly to rebuild the damaged beams, replacing every chemically eaten post with reinforced supports. A brand new pedestrian rail gleamed softly in the pale afternoon sun, and beneath it, the lake reflected the sky like a sheet of silver glass. But the biggest change came not from the bridge, but from the people. Mia walked along the lakeshore path with Ranger trotting at her side, his tail swaying in slow, content arcs. The old dog moved carefully now. He tired more easily, rested more often, but something in him glowed brighter. It was as if being needed again had rekindled a quiet fire inside him. As they approached the newly restored bridge, Tom waited there, hands tucked into his coat pockets. When he saw Mia and Ranger, he smiled. An easy, genuine smile that had been missing from his face for far too long. "Ready?" Tom asked. Mia nodded, and together the three stepped onto Crescent Bridge. The wood no longer groaned with hidden fractures. Every plank had been reinforced, inspected, and blessed, at least in spirit, by the town that had nearly lost so much. At the center of the bridge, a small bronze plaque had been installed. Sunlight caught its engraved letters, making them shimmer like warm embers. In honor of Ranger, the dog who listened when no one else did. Mia knelt beside the plaque, running her fingers over the smooth metal. Emotion tightened her throat. "Look, boy," she whispered. Ranger sniffed the plaque carefully, ears tilted forward. Then, as if understanding the significance, he placed one gentle paw on the wood beside it and rested his head against Mia's shoulder. Tom stepped closer. The town council voted unanimously for it. They wanted everyone, generations from now, to remember what Ranger did. Mia looked up at her father. "And what Evan tried to do." Tom's face softened. "Yes, both of them." A quiet breeze drifted over the lake, stirring Ranger's fur and casting ripples of light across the water. For a moment, the world seemed impossibly still, like the whole town was exhaling after holding its breath for too many months. Mia leaned into Ranger, feeling his heartbeat, slow, steady, unwavering. He had saved her life. He had brought closure to a grieving community. And without saying a word, he had pulled her and her father closer than they had been since the day they lost her mother. As they stood there, bathed in gentle winter sunlight, Mia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. In a world where danger often hides beneath calm waters, and truth sinks deeper than we realize, sometimes it takes a quiet hero to bring everything back to the surface. Ranger didn't wear a badge or speak our language. He didn't need to. His courage was carved into every instinct, every breath, every step he took to protect the ones he loved. And maybe that's the miracle of animals. They hear what we ignore, they feel what we overlook, and they love us long before we understand why. If Ranger's story touched your heart, we invite you to stay with us, because here at Pawprints of Valor, every bark, every heartbeat, every paw print carries a story worth remembering. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every paw print has a story.